originally in Spanish, April 2022. The whole history is wrong and is corrected upon corrections, and nothing stands up under closer and more careful scrutiny. For example, not only was it not Edison who invented the light bulb, because it is said that he stole the invention from Tesla, but it was not Tesla either who invented the light bulb, but a Mexican scientist named Francisco Javier Estrada Murgia around 1860. So everything is basically out of time and in the wrong chronology. Tesla based his discoveries on the advanced electrical principles of Estrada Murgia. I should mention, going back to Tartaria, that some human researchers conclude that Tartaria's domain reached as far south as California in the USA, including Alaska, Canada, and the continental USA. Okay, I have this question. When you mentioned Tartaria in one of the recent videos about Ukraine, some people have picked up on it and said, wait, you said there was no data on that. Now there is? Could you explain how you came to know what you know about Tartaria now and where this new data is from? Yes, the new data comes from my research on Earth with Earth data, because Tartaria is an Earth matter. And Fédération does not have that data recorded with the name Tartaria, but in translation they put it as Southern Hyperborea, or non-Tsarist Russia, or Asian Empire. And the dating is a mess, so I could not place those civilizations registered by the Fédération as recent as coming from Tartaria. Looking at them, I placed them after the flood and before the fall of the Roman Empire, with an error of 2,000 years or more. Another point to explain here that goes with the Tartaria topic is what happens with the sand clock expeditions. Because you would think that we would just go there and that's it. And that is true. The problem is that once there, we cannot easily place ourselves in a time frame, because our ships are not programmed with the navigation computer as the inhabitants of Earth have been indoctrinated, as in movies such as Wells' Time Machine or Spielberg's Back to the Future, by introducing a date into the machine, as in years, months, days, hours, minutes and seconds. It is done by programming an energetic position, a frequency in an energetic frequencies map. That is to say, matter at that point of a star map by frequencies is in such and such a configuration, because the movement in time implies that the matter and the energy of a place change their dynamics of interaction with each other. That is to say that simply because at 9:15 you have on your table your things, and at 9:16 you move a pencil from one place to another within the same table, there is a slight displacement of gravity of the pencil's mass, which is registered as a specific moment in time. Comparative mass gravity point map between how it was at 9:15 and how it was at 9:16. That is what is recorded in the navigation computers, not dates. So you only know it was 9:15 or 9:16 by mass gravity correlation and not by the time on the clock. So when traveling anywhere in time, you don't know what the actual date is unless there is another reference. But this does not mean that if you ask someone on the street, wherever you land, and they tell you the date, it will correspond to what other people on the other side of the same world think simultaneously. In addition to this, on Earth, they add or subtract years at convenience and invent historical events and people, making it impossible to understand where you are within a time frame based on calendars and dates. Because while you will register that you are going to see a character that human history places in the year, say 1700, you then enter the frequency map correlation with that year, and it later turns out that the character was either invented to fulfill an agenda and a narrative, or simply that character lived in another time frame, which confuses your navigation computer. This problem gets worse when in reality, two real characters lived in the same year, say 1700, but official history places them in very different years. The result is a soup of dates that are impossible to decipher. Only with data collected through multiple trips of many ships or the same one can we begin to understand the time frame of the events. Again, by contrast or by correlation or comparison between the dates of an event and what the frequencies and mass gravity positions map indicates. And what I have seen in this regard is that human history is totally invented just by the use of characters or events that they put at different times in history, again, to fulfill a narrative. And the times and dates not only do not correspond, but everything happens in a much more compact time frame. That is to say that what happened in the last 2000 years actually happened in less than 600 or even less. This correlation is found in process. It is said that history is written by the victors. And that is not only the truth, but it gets worse, because said victors not only twist things to their convenience, but openly and shamelessly invent characters and situations that simply never happened. And they also completely erase people and events that did happen, but are simply inconvenient or go against their narratives of population control and their agendas of imposing a belief system on the population in order to exploit them. This kind of data can only be found through the intervention of one or more time-jumping spacecraft that have gone recording human history with frequency mass gravity maps. And the result is that it is now clearly seen that the whole narrative of where humanity comes from, what happened and what did not happen, is totally false. That's why the dates don't correspond, because it's all wrong.
Right. You would need the gravity maps of the area to be able to match the exact frequencies. Everything has gravity, even us. No numbers and hours. That's all inaccurate. Wow, Athena, that's quite the explanation, and thank you very much.
You have to go place by place in history, relating a date to a frequency. And so you find that nothing fits. But nothing. Human history is false, and is made of false writings and documents that have been put in there through time. Historians and scholars have the false idea that if a text is ancient, it must be true. But then they twist everything, like, for example, if something in an ancient text is uncomfortable for the official versions, they will impose the content as if it were mythology, when they are real facts. Or the other way round, they will invent stories and events that they documented to fulfill an agenda, but which never happened, and which they impose as true. If they are doing that today, in front of everyone, what makes you think they haven't done it before? History is to control people with convenient lies. What really happened is hidden in the basements of the ones who control the earth. That is why historically they burn books all the time, insisting that they do not destroy the information but only the copies, and take the originals to the Vatican. No doubt that in many cases the Cabal's lackeys have destroyed books and documents to imitate what their masters do, without first making sure if copies exist, or without first sending them to the Vatican or to their bosses.
Thank you. The only thing people might wonder about, since the Federation is always here, how come they didn't document with their drones the history of mankind?
A question related to Robert's question. Shouldn't there already exist some markers registered in the ships to facilitate these jumps of which you speak? Because I don't think that if you go somewhere, it's for the first time. Unless you want to go to some meaningless date where no one has gone before. I imagine the Federation would already have everything on record if they've always been here. Yes, there are, but not enough. Swaruu Papriyananda, for example, based her first exploration jumps in Sandcloak on that. The problem is that even if something is recorded as happening in the year 1700, it does not mean that everything else that is officially recorded as happening in that same year actually happened in that year. Yes, there are records, and they are used, but they only record certain important events, and a crew then assumes that the data is correct. Example of this is a jump I made with my mom when I was a little girl. We went to see the events around the construction of Hadrian's Wall in Scotland in Roman times, from where we just flew to other parts of Europe, only to see what was simultaneously unfolding there that would correspond to Renaissance paintings or the Renaissance, with an error of about 1500 years on the gravity maps and on the historical terrestrial ones.
So you didn't see anything? But that wall does exist.
We saw how they were building that wall. But at the same time, in France, the Renaissance was happening. It was built from the year circa 120 to 122. Whereas if you went to Paris, they were there with Baroque music and Renaissance paintings.
But how can that be possible? How strange.
It's not strange. It's what I've been explaining here for half an hour. It's just testimony that history is not as they say it is, nor that things happen in that order. That is my point here. The chronology of things is wrong. Even I don't have the correct one, but from experience, plus what Yassi says, I conclude that there isn't even one. Time is semi-linear. There is only a sequence of events that transcend the lifetime of a person or a generation because they live it. If it is recorded in some way, such as in dated documents that preserve the linearity and sequence of events. But if such dates are wrong or falsified on the premise that no one will know, then the temporal linearity is fractured. There can only be a linearity of time, as perceived today, if you have documents or anything that indicates age or time by reference. But if you alter and lie in those documents, then all linearity is broken, because you have no frame of comparison, because time is a perception of the one who lives it. But if people today did not live through the Renaissance, or have no memory of it, they can only believe what the documents tell them to be true. But as I said above, they are almost entirely forged. Another thing I noticed is that according to my mom's more recent records in Susie databanks, trips she took after the disclosure in her timeline, she finds that the Old Testament and the Sumerian tablets that support it, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, were written and made after the New Testament, written by Vespasius and his psychopathic son Titus. But how can you even believe that you can divulge that in a video? Another example of this is the Holy Shroud, that even humans find that it was made in the Middle Ages and not in the time of Jesus. Unless, as I am telling you, the person on the shroud printed there lived in the Middle Ages, corroborating what I say. Unbelievable. One question: above you mentioned the references. You said there can only be a time linearity as perceived today if you have documents or anything that indicates age or time by reference. That's what I was referring to above, that there aren't already a lot of references made before that would be already recorded? And what type are they? Documents that are taken for truth just because they are official, whether they are old or not, as well as dating objects. But they are dating objects using mostly carbon-14, a method that has already been proven on Earth to be so error-prone that it is basically useless. In parentheses, if the carbon-14 dating method is known to be so inaccurate, why is it still being used? Which makes me think it's some sort of PCR test for historical artifacts to force them into an official narrative. If you are referring to the records of other Federation ships, I insist, based on the number of historical event-year correlation references with frequency maps, I see that clearly not many points in history have been recorded or mapped, which lends itself to simple navigational errors. Who does this? Falsifying facts? It is very difficult to know. But the problem may simply come from the very interests of the governments on Earth and their rulers in power at any given moment, each one imposing their own narrative to fulfill their personal interests. With this, destroying the historical linearity that precedes it. And this without even having in mind to confuse history, but simply that person in power will accommodate things to what he wants at the time. An example of this is the addition of 300 years that the Vatican imposed on the Gregorian calendar, basically jumping from the year 700 to the year 1000. However, that is only one of many events of the same nature, some more serious, that have happened. It is only the most documented one. However, I must stress that other scholars of that event indicate different years, some saying it was from the year 722 to the year 1000, others that it was more what they added. But for whatever reason, the bottom line is that the official story does not remotely fit with the sequence of events that can be corroborated in another way, a way that may also be wrong.
Is it known why they did it?
It is assumed that they added those 300-ish years to the Gregorian calendar for economic expediency reasons, over inheritance rights over certain lands in Italy and France, because it was supposed that a certain dynasty had rights over those lands until the year 1000, and those who were in power added those 300 years to the calendar simply to seize those lands for their own economic interests and power. It is also said that it had to do with population control, where people were falsely imposed that they were reaching the year 1000, and therefore the end of time, thereby altering and draining the population of resources, since they thought the world was coming to an end, which smells again like an excuse to do a new reset, one of many there have been, because they are not necessarily big resets, but many small local ones, which further confuses the linearity of the story. Besides, if it is known that they added 300 years to the Gregorian calendar only for their economic convenience, how not to think that they have done it multiple times, before and after? Only that it was not so notorious, because they did it better, or with more care. And then one wonders why history doesn't fit. The official history was only written and imposed to control people and give it a believable context. But it has nothing to do with what really happened. Thank you very much, Athena. I am still not clear on this. If the events are falsified or not, why would it matter to you if you operate with your own data on these events and according to the data recorded by the Federation? What I mean is that the information that these events are falsified would be important to humans. But would it matter to you up there? You don't travel according to the events recorded on Earth, but yours, recorded by the Federation, do you? I don't know if I'm making myself clear. If I go to Amazon's, I am not going to go with maps they have of the area, but my own. It must be taken into account that for the Federation, that is to say, for the races that compose it, the Earth is only a place of billions, without exaggeration. So to see and make the historical mapping of humanity, whether they care or not, we need ultra-detailed frequency maps, which they simply do not have. In that case, my predecessors were pioneers in this. That is, there are and always have been frequency maps of events on Earth, but simply without enough detail to go around this problem. That is, they will travel to see the construction of Hadrian's Wall in Scotland in the year 122, but they just go to what they go to and do not explore what happens in the rest of the world on that date, assuming that everything is as they are told officially for the Federation and officially for or according to human records. So they arrive, see Romans moving stones, assume it is the year 122, and leave. Then they go to the Renaissance, say 1560, and they assume that where they were before was 122, and they don't realize that it happened simultaneously, that the time jump in the ship was not necessary, but just moving as a simple jet from Scotland to Paris. So for people, the Renaissance cannot be at the same time as the Romans in Britain, nor can it be that the Old Testament was written after the New Testament. However, empirical experience proves so. And if you have no memory of previous lives, as humans do not, you can only rely on documents to give sense and linearity to things. And those documents are not at all reliable. If official history said that the Romans were Renaissance, it would be accepted.
But they weren't, were they?
No, but it doesn't fit either. There is something else going on here, and it is very complex, involving fractured timelines, because they are just people's consciousness, and in this case, of ones who saw the existence of Romans and the Renaissance simultaneously. The perception in this case of my mom and me. It is believed that a historical progression is needed. There can't be Renaissance France without things having happened that brought to them to that point, going through the time of the Roman occupation of Gaul. And this is true. A situation or an epoch must come from somewhere, by legacy. However, these legacies did not happen as they are explained in the official history books. There are huge holes, impossible to believe, like the two I have described above. So this brings us to the big question. What to believe then? What can be believed? What is left for us to believe? Because this affects both the inhabitants of the earth and equally those of us who are not humans, who visit and are involved in any way with the earth. The answer is that nothing can be believed, and that again we fall into the same trap. You will have to make up your own mind with the best data available. In short, just always keep in mind that history was not only written by the victors, but was also invented at the convenience of the people in power to fulfill their personal interests and agendas. Maybe that's why I was never very interested in history. As if inside I always sensed that all this is just in human perception, something imposed, something that you don't really know if it happened or not, and how it happened. They say that understanding history is very important. Well, I don't know. For me, it was never so important. Everything is so fluid, and so many versions of realities, all coming together in the singularity of now, which is where it really matters. Yes, exactly. Singularity of now. As Yaski explains, all the pasts, all the timelines, or whatever you want to call them, the true, the false, what happened in another line, all converge in a single point to form it. The whole and the sum of all that mass forms a single point, the now. Yes, that is how I perceive it. That's why even analyzing if something existed or not doesn't call me so much. Only the singularity of now. And the singularity of your now.
Yes, but that past, whether it is real or a lie, somehow defines your now.
Yes, it defines you, whether it is real or not. So, does it really matter to know if everything influences? Yes, as Yaski says, the sequence doesn't matter. It all adds up. 3 plus 20 plus 34 equals 57, as well as 34 plus 3 plus 20 add up to 57. The order doesn't matter. Yes, exactly. That is what I mean. This is my very deep feeling. Same with dates and events. The universe works mathematically, not by simple cause and effect.